Hello everyone, hope you're all having a wonderful day, and today I'm going to be going over my Noxious Ice rogue build for Season 1. Now this build's a lot of fun to use, and if it's not fun to use, I feel like there's just no point using it, so need to make the build as fun as possible. This build is insanely quick, even though we're not taking any of the agility skills the rogue has at its disposal, and because we are so quick, it is going to help for farming and speedrunning nightmare dungeons. We have very good damage, and we also have even better AoE damage with a couple of the aspects we are running, as well as some of the hearts that are inside of Season 1. Being a rogue, we have fantastic crowd control. We have pretty much every crowd control at our disposal. We can slow enemies, we can chill enemies, we can daze enemies, we can freeze enemies, we can knock them down, and we can taunt enemies. This build has some pretty good survivability with the new hearts that have been added into Season 1. We are able to use all elements / all imbuements. We have all the imbuements at our disposal. We are poisoning enemies, we're shadow damaging enemies, and we're also chilling and freezing enemies. I feel like this is where the fun factor comes in, so if you're someone that wants to be able to use all the imbuements with your rogue, this is the build for you. And you're also going to be able to clear just about any bit of content inside of Diablo with absolute ease. I am currently running tier 60 nightmare dungeons with this build, and I'm not even at level 80 in the clips that I am showing you right now, which I think is kind of insane. I wasn't pushing that high on my internal realm rogue, but I feel like with the hearts introduced into Season 1, it has made this build feel a lot better and makes it a little bit more viable. And obviously I haven't fully leveled my rogue up to level 100, so there's so much more damage increases we can get from our Paragon board, and my gear is a little shit. I've got some really bad rolls that I've been trying to get rid of, and I've had no success. So my gear is the best. You guys might have better gear on hand to actually set this up better. Now again, I'm missing like 80 plus Paragon points, and I'm really excited to see how far I can push this through nightmare dungeons. I know nightmare dungeons have kind of been gutted a little bit, and they're not as hard as what they used to be, but if you're still getting like 80 plus completions, you're probably running a pretty decent build. Now moving on over to the skills, this is going to be very similar to a lot of my other rogue builds, literally bar one change, and that's our imbuement. So I'm not going to dwell on these too much, but we are taking puncture as our basic. Now puncture is just really good for just about every single rogue build, mainly due to the modifiers it has. Now for our core skill, we are taking twisting blades. I am a massive twisting blades enjoyer, and I will continue to use twisting blades in my builds. I just don't like really anything else besides a couple of marksman skills. Now next up we do have smoke grenades. Smoke grenades are going to be really good to get instant CC out on the enemies. We are using dark shroud, but we are using an aspect to actually get it out for free without having to take it on our hotbar, but we are still putting points into dark shroud. Now next up we are taking concealment. Concealment is just really strong for trying to push high nightmare dungeons because you're able to go stealth and kind of just sneak up on elites and take them out before the affixes kick your ass. For our imbuement, we are taking shadow imbuement. Shadow imbuement's really good, gives us AoE. And then the next imbuement that we are taking, guys, is poison. Now we're not really using poison to do extra like dot damage or anything. We're mainly using poison imbuement because it's going to help us proc some aspects that we have, and we can get more damage on frozen targets. Now moving on over to the skill tree, guys. I'm sure you've probably seen a million twisting blade rogue builds. I'm not even going to explain this all to you again and just bore you guys shitless. I will leave a link in the description to a macro build. I will set a build planner up on macro, so you guys can just look at that and put the skills in accordingly, because I'm sure you guys probably all know what this stuff does, but there is just one thing I do want to explain, and that is in the imbuement section. So I will just quickly give you an overview. Like I will scroll through everything so you guys can just see now what I am taking, but I'm not going to explain why we are taking everything, because I feel like most people are probably going to know. So yeah, we are taking puncture. We're upgrading all of puncture. We got 5 points into twisting blade, another 3 from our glove. The main thing to note with twisting blades is improved twisting blades. I do enjoy using this a little bit more because we do get instant daze out on the enemies when we hit them with twisting blades. Very strong. Again, nothing in agility. Now moving on over to the subterfuge section. Now I did briefly touch on dark shroud. We are still putting points into dark shroud because we can get it out for free with an aspect without having to put it on our hotbar. So that is why we have points into dark shroud. We have in concealment, I've gone countering stealth because when we break concealment with twisting blades, it's going to be guaranteed crit. The whole animation of twisting blades, if you have blade dancer, will be a crit. Smoke grenades really good. Countering smoke grenades really good just to get lucky hit chance to get it back quicker. Now the main bread and butter of this build is the imbuement section. Now recently I did do a video, well I tried doing a video doing a deep dive on the new Vile Heart for Rogue. I highly recommend you guys check that out because I'm not going to explain everything again because it is a bit in detail, but I will mention one thing. When you are using the Vile Heart and you have points into imbuement and you've upgraded them, the Vile Heart does use the upgrade even if you don't use the imbuement skills at all. You could run no imbuement and just rely on the Vile Heart to proc your imbuement, but yes, all of the upgrades do work, so you don't really need to take cold damage. As long as you're hitting crowd control targets, if Vile Heart procs, it will still do bonus damage. I have tested this and it does seem to be the case. So that is why we have a lot of points into imbuement. But like I said, we're not really using poison to get big dots out there, but I still have put points into mixed poison. You could take the 2 points out of here and go down this route and just get more poison damage, which isn't that great, but you could also get more damage reduction and also more attack speed. I feel like the attack speed is really good if you just want to farm dungeons really quickly. For an overall more balanced build, this just works really well because you can still get really decent dots out there if you get really lucky with the lucky hit procs and you just keep applying double dots. So you can get some really cheesy kills on elites, like you can just leave them alone because you know they're just going to die from dot damage. So I feel like that just helps a little bit more from moving to pack. But by all means, if you guys don't want to use this, you can literally take all your points out of the imbuement and chuck it into the poison section down here. It's completely up to you, but I highly recommend you guys try this out first. And you'll see what I mean by just the extra dot damage is just a little bit better, I feel. Now, one thing to note is like I said, with my gear not being very good, is I'm still trying to hunt for a Frigid Finesse necklace. I do have one, but I can't get the Vile Heart again now, you know, one thing after another. So I'm not even running with this massive damage increase that you can get from having a +3 to Frigid Finesse on your necklace. If I had that, man, this build would be kind of nuts. And the other thing to note is I am taking close quarter combat as my key passive. I really like this. We're always using a marksman and a cutthroat skill. We're always getting 20% attack speed, and we are getting that, always getting that 30% increased damage to crowd control targets, which is really good because we're CCing enemies all the time. Specialization, running combo point. Inner Sight is definitely a lot better for boss fights. You can just obviously keep spamming Twisting Blades, but pretty much for every scenario, combo points is just going to be better for farming and running through dungeons. Inner Sight does pull a little bit ahead on boss fights. Now again, like I said, most of this is like my frostbitten builds that I have done, so I'm not going to dwell too much on the aspects. It's probably too boring for everybody hearing the same thing over and over again. I literally sound like a broken record at this point. So again, the link in the description to the max roll build planner will be there, so you guys can just follow this all along. I am only going to touch on the things that I have changed from my frostbitten build to kind of make the Noxious Ice aspect actually work. So we are still taking Shared Misery, helping us spread CC, really good because we're going to be freezing enemies a lot, and we just want to spread those freeze procs out on the enemy to give us the most amount of damage possible. We have Might still. Might's really strong, giving us extra damage reduction. The main star of the show now is Noxious Ice. I think Frostbitten just is a little bit better because you're able to get instantaneous freeze out on the enemies. But Noxious Ice is kind of fun to play around with because now we're taking poison. So like I said, we can get some pretty crazy poison dots out there. And I feel like it just helped with our overall DPS. Now Noxious Ice, whenever we poison enemies that are already chilled, they're going to be further chilled for 20%. Now we do have Frost Feeder glyph in, so this is actually 40%. Pair this with Icy Alchemist. If we're not freezing enemies with Noxious Ice, Icy Alchemist is doing it because it has even more chance to chill. These two aspects working in conjunction with one another is just really satisfying, just because we can always continuously get freeze out there without having to use stun grenades now. Still taking Disobedience. Disobedience, even with the nerf, is just too good not to take. Now we are still running with Penitent Greaves. I absolutely love this. This is going to be really good for farming and speedrunning because of the increased movement speed we do get with these boots. We are still taking Accelerating Aspect. We're going to get insane attack speed whenever we critically strike with our core skill. Now on our necklace, we do have the Umbrious Aspect. I touched on this in the skills with Dark Shroud. This is how we're able to get Dark Shroud out for free because we already have insane attack speed. When we use Puncture, it's thrown out pretty quick. So when we do get a lucky hit chance, we have a 90% chance to get a Dark Shroud. So we're able to keep it up pretty consistently. Really enjoying this aspect. It's a lot of fun to use, and the fact that we're able to get an extra skill for free, and that skill being Dark Shroud, which gives us damage reduction and more movement speed, what more do you want? We are still taking Expectant on the ring. Now for the next ring, I do have Blade Dancers on this ring. And on my weapons, I do have Icy Alchemist. And then the next aspect is the new aspect that got added into Season 1 for Rogue, and that is the Pestilent Point. Now on paper, this doesn't really seem that great. It isn't really just by itself, but being able to apply Poison Immune every third cast of our puncture is a pretty consistent way to actually get Poison Immune out there. It would have been really cool to see them just do this for all basic skills instead of just puncture. They clearly have been watching a lot of builds because everybody uses puncture, but it would have just been cool to see this for every basic skill. But either way, this is really good for getting disobedience procs because any damage is going to give you those disobedient armor procs. This works really well with Noxious Ice. We're able to get those chill procs more consistently without having to rely on our actual poison imbuement, and we can kind of save our poison imbuement for when the enemies are frozen because that's when we're going to deal the most amount of damage. It's great for getting bursts and venoms out, and also more poison dots for any of those poison rogue builds. Now moving on over to the heart we are taking for this build. It is no surprise I am taking the Vile Heart. I feel like the Vile Heart works the best for what I was trying to build. Now our attacks have a 10% chance to apply all imbuement effects at 80% potency. Now ideally you do want to try and aim for a 10% or higher because you're going to get more consistent procs. 15 would be great. 10 still does seem to work pretty consistently, especially if you are taking a lot of attack speed, which is what we are doing in this build. Now like I explained in skills, this is very strong. We now don't have to take chill, but we can still get chilled imbuement upgrade, which lets us do insane amounts of increased damage to crowd control and double that to frozen targets. Very, very strong heart. Now I would also like to recommend that if you guys do have a spare barber heart or a spare necklace that you can throw on, if you want to just absolutely steamroll through dungeons, you would want to use Vile because it's way better for just clearing out ads and mobs and just getting yourself through the dungeon. Switch to barber for the boss fight. Absolutely destroy. Now the next heart that I am taking is one that I'm really enjoying inside of Season 1, and that is the heart that whenever you use the subterfuge skill, it leaves behind a shadow decoy trap for all the enemies in the room get taunted to that son of a bitch, and he just blows up, dealing 5,000 plus shadow damage to all nearby enemies. Now this is really good because it just CCs all the enemies in the room. They get lured to him and you can kind of just go around and just do your rotation without having to worry about anything. And because we are using 2 subterfuge skills, we can play around with this on and off cooldown. Now ideally you want a 5-second one. Now remember, this cannot occur more than once every 5 seconds. So if you've got a 5-second timer on him and he can't occur more than once every 5 seconds, well then all you have to do is wait for him to explode, and then you can reuse another subterfuge skill and he will be ready to go again. I feel like this is really strong, especially going into a massive room with elites, and you just taunt all of them and you don't really have to worry about everything steaming your hams at once. Last but not least, the offensive heart we are using is the one that increases our critical strike damage, but then we also take just an overall damage nerf. Now overall, taking 83 plus critical strike damage, I feel like that definitely outweighs taking a negative 43% to your non-critical strike damage. Now we do have decent crit and we are attacking really fast, so I feel like we can take advantage of this 83% quite frequently, and it is really nice to see that we're already hitting for like 2 mil at like level 80. That is insane. So these hearts are really, you can play around with whatever hearts you want. I feel like the Vile is a must-have for this build because it just makes it work and synergize a lot better. These two you can just play around with whatever you want. Throw the one that suppresses damage. You can take the munitions one, I think it's called, the one that drops all the stun grenades. You can do whatever you want here. Honestly, I just feel like the Vile is the main one that you probably need to take if you are trying to build this build. I will just quickly go over my stats here. Again, these are all over the place and definitely not anywhere finalized at all, but I know some people would like to see this. I will just quickly scroll through. We do have 34.5% critical strike chance. I highly recommend you guys prioritize critical strike chance because we don't get a lot as a rogue. We have a lot of critical strike damage. We have a lot of critical strike damage with imbued. Remember, this stacks with your critical strike damage, so your imbued skills actually deal more critical strike damage overall than you just critically striking normally. We only have 102.2% vulnerable damage. Here's like all damage, my damage versus elite, shield, frozen, close. There's core, my damage with core, damage with imbuement, damage with cutthroat. Like I said, it's all pretty much all over the place. It's not really been min-maxed at all. I've kind of just been throwing better bits of gear in as I've been getting them. Because let's be honest, trying to re-roll in your affixes at the occultist is friggin' expensive, and I am a tight ass even in a virtual game. Now, as you can see, I only just got over halfway through my Paragon board, so it's not really finished. I'm not going to go over it right now because it's not a finished Paragon board, and I need to switch some stuff around after I have fully completed it. So again, go and check that Maxwell build planner. All of this will be there. If you do want a much more detailed explanation on how I do set up my Paragon board, check out my 50 to 100 rogue leveling guide for season 1. So yeah, check out that video. I'm going to go over the Paragon board in much more detail. And that is basically it. Hopefully you guys do enjoy this build video. If you guys are coming from any of my Frostbitten Rogue builds or anybody else's Frostbitten Rogue builds on YouTube, and you're kind of looking for the same gimmick but using something different, hopefully the Noxious Ice build can cure that itch that you guys are looking for. Again, you're not going to get instantaneous freeze procs out like Frostbitten, but we're basically playing around with 90% chill per second with both Noxious Ice and Icy Alchemist synergizing with Frost Feeder Glyph, giving us 20% extra chill. I feel like it's really fun. You're going to get a lot of Frost procs out there, even though we're not using the Frostbitten aspect. I'm hopefully going to have 2 more rogue builds coming for you guys. I'm going to be trying out something different, one more thing with melee, and then I'm going to move on and try Marksman Rogue. I do have an idea with Barrage, and I'm hoping it works because I feel like it could be really cool. And it's all thanks to these lovely hearts that we've got in season 1. They really have opened a window and door for a lot of builds that wouldn't work otherwise. So that is basically it from me, guys. Appreciate all the love and support as always. And until next time, stay safe. Peace out.